Well, as per usual, when it comes to charging my phone, that took longer than expected. Well, anyway, got warmed up, had a lovely little chat with my psychologist, and, yeah, now and I got something to eat at a very nice, Iranian-themed restaurant, or more so, I guess. Well, it was mainly Iranian dishes, but it was more just themed of like the Persia region of Middle East. So it had some other cuisines from like, well, I'd assume it had some Afghani and also maybe maybe some Azerbaijani cuisine. Well, I think there was one that might have been Azerbaijani, but anyway, very nice. But anyway, back to things that I wanted to talk about. So I capped off what I wanted to say. I said mainly what I wanted to say with, like, when it came to my personality. I ended with talking about gender expression and persona and all that. That was a divot. But so yeah, and don't take. I'm just gonna reiterate this now. Though yes, I just say that much of my gender expression, it has heavy elements of transgenderism. I don't personally, I don't believe physical gender is just solely based on identification or your expression. As I've said, gender is based on, well, your chromosomes and also your physical reproductive system and your hormone levels and things of the sort. And the difference in those could indicate a different assigning of gender, basically. And whereas gender expression is how you present yourself with certain traits of, well, different genders or what has been associated to said genders. I believe from just scientific understanding, what would be considered in genderology, there are officially recognized 71 different genders. In terms of sexuality, when it comes to what you are attracted to, you can be attracted to literally people. This is so stupid when people ask, like, why are you attracted to this gender or that gender or this expression of gender or these traits of, like, these genders. We can't always explain why we are attracted to something. In some regards, as I've stated with other things before, in relation to more problematic attractions, such as, well, pedophilia and pedophilia or herbophilia and things of the sort, that's sad, but for ones that are non-problematic, you can't always explain why. Sure, you could psychoanalyze, obviously it comes down to psychosexual analysis in some form, but you can maybe pinpoint what might have led you to the attraction of it. No, it is not physical abuse most often in that regard, and also, even if it was, that doesn't mean it's inherently like your attraction is bad. Maybe how you developed it, that's a different story. And also, no, for some people believe that homosexuals or anyone, or even bisexuals or pansexuals or gynosexuals or androsexuals or omnisexuals, they believe that there are people who believe that, well, they didn't have good mother or father figures or just parental figures in their lives, which is complete bullshit for people who did have good relations with their parents and still develop that sexual attraction. But anyway, that's a whole nother topic, a whole nother video. So you can't always explain why you are attracted to certain things. We can analyze well, but sometimes we can't explain it. Same with different types of romances, different romantic types. Anyway, back to what that's a whole another different thing. It relates to it, to gender, obviously, the attraction to gender, but that's a whole different thing that I'm not going to get into right. Well, it's a different rant that I'm not going to get into, is what I'm trying to say. In terms of my gender expression, though, there's a lot of, aspects of transgenderism in it. Do I identify as transgender? No. I personally go by, what is my gender, and that is cis male. I'm a man. I'm male. So, anyway, quick side note, where I'm walking along here in Orleans. I don't remember if in the third part of Exploring Ottawa, when I was showing this little plaza with, it has Alibaba's bakery in it, the Middle Eastern / Northern African themed bakery. I don't remember if I referred to this place as a cafe, but if I did, I was wrong about that. I read the sign wrong. I thought that said Hair Tech Coffee, and I never heard the term coffee before, so I thought, oh, coffee, okay, they must sell coffee. Maybe it must be some form of, coffee shop. It must just be another English slang term for coffee shop, or cafe. But I read it wrong. It says coiffeur. Either coiffeur or coiffurie. I read it wrong. No, that might be coiffeur. Hair Tech Coiffeur. I don't know what it means, but I was wrong. If I said that, I read it wrong. Okay. Crossing the road. I'm gonna go a bit slower when running because, if you couldn't tell, it's raining somewhat, or it's spitting, and the ground is very damp. So, anyway, detaching from that, the whole bit about there's no such thing as ego death, really technically, and dissecting my own personality through psychoanalysis. Something else that I want to talk about here was it's really the concept of, it's not the concept, it relates to social constructs. So recently I actually just discovered a channel that I'm really happy I found, called he's a really great content creator, in my opinion. He's called Sunn M'Cheaux, or Sunn M'Cheaux. Sunn M'Cheaux. M'Cheaux? Sunn MS. No, not MS. Sunn MC. I'm sorry if I'm butchering your last name, but it looks like, in terms of the ending of said last name, it looks to be of more French origin, even though, as I'll get into a sec, they don't have French heritage. So basically, I'll call them Sunn MC. They're well known enough, I guess, in the political commentary community on YouTube, but they make really informative content, especially for me, because actually they're a linguist teacher, so I guess in terms of philology, which would be study of language and linguistics, and they teach at Harvard University in the USA. And because of them, I'm actually glad I found this out. So they talk about a lot about well, their cultural heritage, and that being of Gullah heritage. And I had never actually known what Gullah was until finding them. So basically, Gullah is an ethnic group in the black dysphoria. Dysphoria is okay, when it's referring to an entire global community. I'm saying that right. Dysphoria. Yes, that's the correct. It's not dysphoria, because that's not okay. I know I'm saying that right, for fuck's sake. God damn my memory issues. Okay, that was a bit I'm getting a little irritated with that. In the global out of the entire global black ethnicity groups, hold on a second. Okay, that made me, I can admit I got a lot more agitated than I should have, but okay, it's been a long few days. I shouldn't have gotten as agitated as I did, but I knew that not knowing that word really bugged me. It's these goddamn memory problems right now. This disassociation, it really was bugging me. But diaspora, the black diaspora, that was the fucking word, was diaspora. Not whatever I said before, just diaspora. Okay, so I didn't know that before finding his channel, I didn't know that this ethnic group, which is part of the black diaspora, even existed. And apparently, it's called Gullah, or sometimes referred to as Gullah Geechee. And the language that they speak, which is a Creole language, is also called Gullah. And I'm actually really glad I found that out. They're an ethnic group that are descendants from Western and mainly Western African, other Western African ethnicities, and they primarily inhabit the southeasternmost shorelines of continental America. And it's not a ginormous ethnic group, but it's there. I didn't know about it. And they talk a lot about Sunn M'Cheaux, or Sunn MC, talks a lot about his culture relating to it, because he is of Gullah descent, and part of the culture. And it's really damn, in my opinion, good videos, informative videos. I obviously don't agree, and this is what I'm going to get into, I don't agree with everything he says in certain things, but what I will talk about, I should say that, let me gather my thoughts. What the fuck am I trying to say? Okay, he talks a lot about, as I said, political commentary in many regards, and just social commentary in general. And a lot specifically pertaining to racial issues in, well, societal prejudice and bigotry and things of the sort, or just racial discrimination, cultural alienation in regards to much of black culture and black communities, not just in relation to America, but other parts of the world as well. And, well, a lot of the history that has gone, well, that has been prevalent with said different cultures. But a few things that just one thing that's that he said in one of his videos that I think is really interesting. So another thing actually that I learned from watching his videos and then doing further research myself was that the prevalence of whiteness, of basically people of more Caucasian descent or of European descent being referred to as white, was actually never, it wasn't always that way. Mainly it was mainly perpetuated by a lot of the elitist monarchies of Europe back in, you can go ahead. You as well. Oh, you too. No. Okay. So I should have looked a bit more carefully before taking a large step forward. Anyway, talk about how the prevalence of being called white, basically, or whiteness in white culture, or specifically European culture, was mainly perpetuated in an attempt to stop a potential uprising or basically a collusion between, basically to stop the lower class, more European descended ethnic groups of, well, more ancient Central, Western, and as well, I guess, Eastern Europe, from basically colluding with, black ethnic groups within Europe, who had mainly been sold into it through slave trade, or sold into slave trades and ended up in Europe for those purposes. Basically, it was an attempt to make a distinction and highlight between European descended culture, traditions, in that sense, whiteness, basically, or, well, what is known as, like, socially whiteness or white culture, and a distinction between black culture at the time in ancient Europe. So, I didn't know that. I had known, obviously, from my research about, in regards to history and sociology and culture, that's, for a second I thought I walked past the place I'm trying to get to. So in regards, I had known, obviously, that there had been much cultural alienation that had been pushed from monarchies, and also, in general, there had been much prevalence placed on what had been deemed the superiority of European descended white culture. And I'd mainly also, well, this is true of, like, it's stemming from fear of the unknown, and also, well, a lot of racial bias stemming from fear of the unknown, and also fear of difference, basically. Fear of fear of the lack of understanding, if you know what I mean. So there was that element to it, but I'm just saying I never knew that that was also pushed, and was because, like, the whole push for, I thought that, whiteness, as it's referred to in terms of racial distinction, was, you know what, I'm not going to cross right here, I'll cross over here. I think I did this once before, and this little entrance to a parking lot of a plaza ended up being just as busy as this small intersection on the road here. I never knew that historically there wasn't always a distinction when the prevalence came about of, the slave trade and, basically Eurocentrism and that sort of thing. I didn't know that whiteness in terms of culture and, skin pigment wasn't entirely, it wasn't pushed until there was the fear from elitists way back when in Europe that there could be potential, though there was in their eyes there was the potentiality of a threat to them through the poor whites and, poor blacks, just basically joining in a counter-revolution, basically. I never knew that. And obviously not just one counter-revolution, just the idea of multiple, like, small insurrections or, like, defiance of the ruling class and that sort of thing. Anyway, but switching hands, my other hand is getting cold. But okay. I don't even know if they're going to be open. This walk might be pointless. Well, it won't be entirely pointless, I guess, because of what I'm saying here. But so I never knew that, and I'm really happy to actually have found that out. Well, I'm not, okay, wrong wording, I'm not happy to have found that out. Like, that's terrible on a multitude of in my logical ethics, that's horrible. But, and by the way, for those of you who are confused, a lot of, apparently before there was a prevalence on white skin pigment and also cultural traditions of Europe, people were mainly grouped in ethnically by, which they still are, but back in the day more prevalently by nationality or specific regional ethnicity, basically. But one thing though, I do disagree with him on, in not just that video, but in a certain regard, some other ones that he's made. So I guess the narrative that he's coming from on this is that it kind of stems from this whole, there's a belief that black people can't be racist, or people of color can't have racial prejudice, technically. Which, okay, I'm going to, in my opinion, now I heard what he had to say about it. And I get, like, what he's coming from, like, I get the point, like, how am I going to say this? I get from the way that he described it, which is not wrong, I get where he's coming from, but I still don't, I think it's worth noting that, okay, so anyway, let me actually explain it. Try to explain. Oh, there's a bike. I'll move out of the way. Let me try to explain it. Oh, not just any bike. The electric motorbike. Anyway, the way I'll try and explain it is well, basically, race, and I'd already known this before, but I guess it's more associated with this. They explained it. Race isn't technically just skin color. Now, most often it can be used to refer to that, but it also very well includes, well, your ethnic group that you've, well, descended from, and it can also include, well, in regards to race, obviously even being a part of an ethnic group can come with cultural traditions, and just basically it relates to culture as well, which is not wrong by any means. But there's a thing. This is why I absolutely agree with him on this, and many other people, I don't like this term, the whole, oh, I don't see color. I don't like the whole, I got into a conversation with one of my friends who disagrees with me on this. I personally do think that, now obviously I don't think everyone who uses this, this wording, obviously it's not, I'd say most people actually who use this wording don't mean it from a place of, maliciousness. It's just a bit of an ignorant way to word it. Mainly because, well, I think it's the whole, I don't see color or I don't see race, I'm colorblind thing. Well, ideally, yeah, that sounds like it would be a good thing, but it's just by saying that, it's not even really by saying, by believing that. If you actually believe, I don't care about your skin tone and all that, or I don't care about what cultural background you are, I don't care about, I accept you no matter what in that regard. Well, sounds nice, up front, but the way that can be problematic is you're ignoring, at least from my stance, you're ignoring the long, deeply rooted history that many of those ethnic groups, and it doesn't even just refer to, not this whole not seem, it doesn't even just refer to, let me cross over here, it doesn't just refer to people in the black community or Latino community or Hispanic or Han or Arab. It doesn't just refer to people of color. It can refer to, well, white people as well. Not seen, because there's deep-rooted history in all of it. There's long ethnic history and culture that is that is a part of it, and also a lot of atrocity that has gone into it. So saying that you don't see color, it's kind of you're doing the opposite of what you're trying to do, basically. Most often I'd say unintentionally. You're just saying you don't see color is problematic because you're ignoring. It's basically saying, yeah, I'm ignoring the fact that you have these non-problematic differences. Anyway, that's, I guess, I agree with them on that. But, oh, no. No, you didn't hear that, YouTube. reclaiming system, you didn't hear that. No, don't keep... It's still drizzling right now. Anyway... What I'm trying to say is, one thing that I definitely disagree with them on is, I don't like, it's not even really disagree, it's just how the argument, and it's not just them. I see a lot of different like YouTubers on the political commentary community, or in the political commentary community, and just people who are more left-leaning in terms of the political spectrum, social life. I hear a lot of this argument going like, oh well, race is a social construct, and gender is a social construct, and religion is a social construct. I hear a lot of like the argument coming from, well, it's kind of it's problematic because it is a social construct, which I heavily disagree with. Like, it's not even that, again, I said that this didn't seem like Sunn MC's argument. Like, it's just from the way that it's, I guess the way the argument is presented, I don't like this whole, I don't like this, like, stance that because it's a social construct, therefore it's, what's the word I'm looking for? Because it's a social construct, therefore it's either more problematic because of that reason, or it's invalid, which I heavily disagree with. Like, just because something is a social, yes, there are problematic, okay, I don't like this whole, okay, if someone says like, if someone is coming from the stance that like, oh, it's a social construct, so it doesn't matter, we can be free with it, which you should be able to, in my regard. Well, in regards to what I've mainly said here, it's a social construct, so it's just irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, which, more on a philosophical level, if you're coming at it from like a nihilistic perspective, yeah, it is. But I don't like the whole stance, like just saying, oh well, it's a social construct, therefore it's not as, God, I hate fucking neurological word finding issues. I really hate it. Okay. Skipping over like what I'm showing you, I think you get the point of what I'm like. If you're coming at the argument, like the way that I'm trying to say what I'm saying, I think you know what I'm trying to say. It's like, but going away from that, why I don't like that whole stance on it is because technically everything is a social construct in some way. Like, not just like, and especially for assigning labels to things. That is a social construct. Like you say like, oh, I don't like, in terms of like, say, gender and sexuality, there are people who say that, well, I don't really like assigning labels to things because, well, it can be fluid, it can be flexible in many regards. There's varying differences, which is all true in many regards. But that doesn't mean you don't need to categorize something in a way that is more understandable. And I'm not saying like obviously in relation to race, what we were talking about here, that what I just talked about, having the history that it had, in terms of the differentiation between whiteness, blackness, and, well, other ethnicities. Yes, it has a long problematic history as a social construct. But in that regard, I don't think it's inherently a problem that it is a social construct in the first place. I think you know what I mean by that. How it came about to be a social construct is horrendous, and it's how it came about was very from a place of unfounded hierarchical stance, like mindset, and hierarchical, like a superiority complex in psychology and things of the sort. And, well, in this regard to race, well, white supremacy, so, or technically European supremacy. But I'm going to hit this button so that the light actually changes. I'm back outside as well, as you can see that Indigo Chapters store that had the berries outside of it. I don't know if they're dying. I'll go look at a different time. They might be dying out for the season. Anyway. Like, I don't think... What I'm saying is, just because it's a social construct, I don't think makes it bad. Like, here's an example. Trees that point to the tree. Trees. No matter what language it is, or... I'm gonna cross. Okay. No matter what language you're speaking in, whatever the word is for a tree, a plant that produces oxygen for other living creatures to breathe and grows just naturally in a lot of different, well, there are different kinds of trees, and they grow in different climates of the world. Some climates are too cold to even inhabit trees in their ecosystem, such as mainly Greenland and Antarctica, or unless they're very low growing trees. But anyway, no matter what language it is that you call whatever the word is for these plants or these living organisms in the natural world and our environment, an ecosystem, it's still well, we've decided to call it that thing. I'm going to use the English example, obviously, because, well, I don't, unfortunately, know how to say tree in any other language. We call it a tree. Or in scientific terms, we've decided to categorize it into this, like in terms of like botany or botanology. We decided to categorize what makes up a tree in its genotype or its genus and like its well, its family, its botanological family. Scientifically, we've created these we've created things to define what is considered a tree. All of that is a social construct. The name of it, the grouping of it into like specific, like its specific properties to make these different variations of this genus a tree. So yeah, I think you get what I'm trying to say. It's a social construct, basically just having names for anything, or categories and different properties that make up said, well, things. what they consist of. That's all a social construct. Or the idea of, well, let's say, well, hey, the idea of forming a society is, well, or calling this shared community, like, the shared community environment of human beings and other living beings in certain capacities, such as other animals, is a social construct. Like, you get what I'm saying, I think. So I don't like the argument that always starts. I hate it. I really don't. Oh, I don't want to say I hate it. I don't hate it technically, but I don't like every time. It's a little just. It just seems redundant, and it's just a little. It's tiring to constantly hear, for me at least. Oh, well, this is every argument like this starting off with, it's a social construct. Therefore, well, we can dismantle it this way, yes, but therefore also it's bad, is what I'm saying. Which, it may have a terrible history of it being, well, of it being a social construct. It may be like, it might have been created for a horrendous purpose, but I don't think inherently just because it's a social construct means that it's terrible. It really is something to group in, like, so we recognize what is similar in these properties. Now, yes, it's very obvious that can be used as demonstrated to divide people greatly, but anyway, I think you know what I mean. And in regards to that, I don't believe, or in this regard, they brought up how they don't think that, say, black people can be racist. I don't, on the basis of this, or even really by what their logic was, what Sunn's logic is that they're using. Still, technically, yeah, they can be. Now, they made a distinction, though, that in most regards, they say that people who have been racially suppressed can't be systemically racist. Which technically, I guess I can see the point to that, like, that point. But, well, on the other hand, though, there is, well, obviously there's, in my opinion, in terms of psychology, there's very much, like, obvious proof of psychologically internalized racism and internalized prejudice of multiple different ethnic groups. That's not to say that everyone who comes to a different conclusion than what is associated with a culture or ethnicity is internalizing racism. Most often, I think, well, in my opinion, most often they are. And that does, even if they aren't, that doesn't make their point any less, well, wrong or racist, in my opinion. But what I'm saying is, so I guess yes. Well, if you have internalized racism, then and you are actively rooting for and supporting, well, you're supporting, like, the social environment that is encouraging said racial suppression or systemic destruction, then technically you are still contributing to systemic racism or systemic prejudice, and it doesn't even have to be racism, just any form of superiority prejudice, technically, but then again, I get what, like, obviously it's not, well, it didn't stem from, like, the systems that are in place didn't stem from their culture and ethnicity putting it in place. And they didn't stem from, you get what I'm trying to say. But anyway, I think that if you couldn't tell, I'm outside of a Walmart. Speaking of class hierarchy, perfect place to be talking about that. Anyway. No, I'm gonna sit down right now instead of pacing. I gotta buy something in here anyway. Unfortunately, but I've got to try to buy 2 things in here, as I said, a tripod and a basket. Anyway, they brought up this point how they don't believe that people of color who are in white power structures, societal structures, can be racist, or more in their regard, systemically racist. I still don't agree with that. Mainly in regard, okay, the definition of race, again, as said, it can include skin tone, skin pigment, and also, though, ethnicity and, like, cultural, ethnic background, and in association with that, cultural background. But in that regard, okay, if we're going by that, okay, the definition of racism, let's say, well, it is technically prejudice or stigma, and also, well, bias towards a group based upon one's, well, background or heritage. And in that regard, from that definition, then yes, anyone can have racial prejudice. But in going from the definition of, well, race as a social construct, and being further, like, harped on and proprietary by European monarchies to create, like, a sense of superiority in the white lower classes, basically. Going from that definition, basically, there's, well, going off of that definition, there's okay, why am I trying to get my words? Oh my god. Going off of that definition, that still, if, okay, let's say the essence of blackness in terms of that definition was created to perpetuate, well, divide between the classes economically, like financially. Well, then in that regard, if blackness and whiteness were formed in that sense, or no, I don't want to say formed because obviously they existed, but proprietary as that, they were exemplified, I guess would be the word. Like, they were heavily focused on in that sense. Then whiteness, though, you can still, by that definition of it including ethnic background, skin pigment, and also cultural tradition and heritage in that regard, then that would still also be prevalent in, well, having bias towards Euro ethnicities, basically, and, well, people of what would be considered whiteness. So it's still a prejudice. And if you're going by that definition, then yes, I would say that black people, Latino people, Hispanic people, Persian people, Han people, sub-Saharan people, whatever it may be, obviously can still have racial bias and racial prejudice. Now, again, is that because of the white power structures or systemic racial issues that are prevalent or present in an environment and a society? Yes, I could definitely say that it is still because of, or at least for the most part, is because of, well, what has been taught, what has been seen in a society, or what has been put forth in the society as being proper, as being normal. So yes, do I think that it still comes from like ethnically white hierarchy? Yeah. Or that racial bias towards white people comes from racism in and of itself affecting a certain community of whatever it may be, of person of color, then yes, or people of color, then absolutely yes. It obviously is. But I'm just saying, so I don't agree with the whole, if you're going by that definition, I don't think that you can say that, switching hands. Oh, my hand's cramping. I don't think you can technically say that a person of a different race, by that definition of race, as a social construct, can't be racist. You very much can. Which neither one is a good thing, and it seems to be, as I just said, in most regards, it still comes back to, well, white supremacy, basically. And in much of the world, it comes back to colonialism and imperialism. So, I think you get what I mean. That's just one thing that I disagreed on in that regard. So I think you know what I mean when I'm saying by, I don't like the argument of just because it's a social construct that's... And by the way, this isn't directed at, like, Sunn himself. I'm just, like, saying, like, I'm using that as an example. Anyway, I think you get what I mean, like, why I don't like those two arguments. I don't know, maybe I'll elaborate a bit more on it in a different video. Like, when I'm not freezing right now. I'll have to see. But anyway, go check out Sunn M'Cheaux's channel. I'll link his channel in the description. Go check him out. If you like his content, then go subscribe. What else right now? What's one more thing that I can quickly touch on? And like, well, we're at 40. This one video that this section of the video that I'm recording now is at 42 minutes. So, what's something I can touch on quickly when my phone also has still some charge left? Here, let me think about that. Okay. I was actually thinking of maybe like, well, I was thinking of maybe doing this in a different video, talking about this, but you know what, it actually relates to what I just talked about in a certain regard, so fuck it, I'll do it now, because why not? And I'm not gonna, again, with the charge I have, how much charge do I have? 13%. I'll just go over it here now. if I think about it, if I remember to, I probably will at some point in the future try to elaborate on this more, as I'm constantly thinking about these things. But this is coming from my logical standpoint. Again, if you know me by now, what this whole, why I'm even in Ottawa, you know I've been experiencing an existential / morality crisis, thoughts of human nature, questioning of my philosophies, ideologies, and things of the sort. So in my logical stance, this is what, well, this is. Well, not even what this is, it's just, it's, well, it's, someone took wheeling carts into the store. I've been thinking about this in my logical sense, if I still actually believe in this stance of, well, in regards to this eco-political system, the eco-political system of capitalism, basically. Well, I don't believe in it. Obviously, I'm against capitalism. I consider myself logically to identify as a libertarian communist, so, well, that's logically. Anyway. Okay, so this portion of the video is for any left-leaning, well, fellas out there. Anyone who's, on the political spectrum, socially more ideologically towards leftism, or, I guess as well center-left, or just any form of, like, left-leaning, you have a more left-leaning rhetoric, I guess. In relation to capitalism, I've been thinking about this. If I'm logically thinking, okay, we know a lot of the major, like, eco-political ideologies that have been really present in the last, well, I want to say, technically in either their pre-ideological form or in their ideological form, last like 300 years. So like capitalism, fascism, communism, socialism, certain ideals of other forms of mixed economy. But anyway, those have been like the main, or well, this isn't economic, so this is governmental political, but I guess, well, in terms of governmental political, democracy, republicanism, which I actually just learned that term a little while ago, and I would actually, technically is what most of the modern world in terms of democratic policies would be referred to. Canada, US, also Europe, South America, a lot of the world, be referred to as this, which I don't think this. I think it's the way that I think this is like a subtle form of authoritarianism in pretty well every regard, but how a lot of societies are set up. But anyway, what I'm trying to say. Or like anarchism and things like that. Okay, four main, like, really, like, known economic political ideologies that have existed in the last 300 years. Capitalism, communism, socialism, fascism. Let's go with that. There's been the distinctions made between all four of them. But if you were to ask someone on the left-leaning part of the political spectrum, they would say that capitalism and fascism are both rightist or right-winged ideologies inherently, which, yes, I would agree with that they are right-winged or leaning towards the right. Well, absolutely, fascism is leaning towards the right. and capitalism, yes, is. But so they've grouped those two onto that side. But if I'm really looking at it, I'm honestly wondering if capitalism should either A, just be considered a form of fascism, if capitalism, or B, if capitalism has, well, obviously it does, and should be regarded as so, having multitude of fascistic elements to it, or if C, that it's just a subtly disguised version of fascism, which, well, actually, hey, maybe this sounds pretentious. I guess most people, well, even people who maybe would agree with that, I think there's still a distinction made, is what I'm saying is, should there really be I guess what I'm trying to word this is, should there really be a distinction made between, like, capitalism and fascism in a really large regard? Like, because here's an example, here's a distinction, okay, fascism being an eco-political ideology is not, it doesn't have to technically be authoritarian by its own stance, even though I think it inevitably leads to inherently is inevitably going to lead to authoritarianism, but it doesn't have to technically operate in a dictatorship, or what is regarded as a dictatorship, like what is indoctrinated into it. Whereas Nazism, or neo-Nazism more so, is it's a sector of fascism. Well, Nazism is a governmental ideology that implements a fascistic economy, basically. Basically fascism in that regard, hierarchy of social class, and also hierarchy based on ethnic group, which is very much prevalent in Nazism and just even in the basis of fascism, which I know it might be hard to distinguish. Well, wait, how can that not be a dictatorship if, like, fascism alone and not Nazism? Maybe I'll get into that in another video, but just the bare definition of, like, fascism is technically not what would be considered a dictatorship, even though, well, I inevitably think it logically leads to hierarchy of ethnicity and of race and of financial class, so and just people group. And anyway, Nazism calls for dictatorship, specifically Nazism calls for totalitarian rule of totalitarianism, which is the most extreme end of authoritarianism, and also separation of class and ethnicity in hierarchical form. But in that regard, I'm wondering, should capitalism oh god, my phone is dying. Should capitalism be considered, start actively being considered not its own entire separate ideology that has very much, heavy similarities to fascism, but should it actually just be grouped into, I guess if we're talking about, again, relates to social constructs, should it be grouped into a form of economic fascism instead of making the distinctions between the two? Even though, I guess, because I just talked, this might sound contradictory, I just talked about how it's good to, I think, have distinctions between certain things. But in this regard, I would argue that for this ideology, it's not, there's a really, well, the distinctions are very, like, hairline thin. At least from my logical standpoint of it. So because again, capitalism is based on wealth hierarchy, social status economically, based on monopoly. It inevitably, not even, okay, technically not based on, but it leads, in my logical stance, to monopolization with unregulated control of free market and being able to amalgamate so much wealth to a point where, and there isn't infinite numbers of, relating to not having infinite numbers of resources, you can't just, okay, I don't know how, like, what am I at? I'm still at 5%. I'm obviously, even though I know about economics, I'm not an economist. I know about, like, how they operate, or I logically feel I do, how economies operate in this regard in terms of ideology and how it's put into practice. Now, the one thing I'm ignorant on, though, is, like, I know of, like, extracting value from land and the value of certain things, what it can be worth, and trying to, like, harness trying to gain value off of something and trying to accumulate from it, wealth from it. I don't know exactly, though, how arbitrarily, like, why, I don't know how things, like, how the value of things are determined. I can make a guess to, obviously, like, rarer materials, or something being, like, say, housing value, if, like, the land that it's on, or in, like, the market that it's trying to advertise for, like, the area that it's in, getting higher in value, mainly because of, let's say, because of how little, like, how rare it is to actually be able to obtain the space that it's in, let's say, or how in high demand it is. Let's say, okay, I don't know how exactly the value is determined, but I know what the value is sadly used for. But anyway, in that regard, let's just say, okay, in terms of, I think capitalism leads to monopoly in that regard, and back to actually what I was going to say with that is, even though I may not know, like, how exactly each value of something, how the arbitrary value of something is determined, whether how rare of a material it is or how common it is, you can't tell me that. This is why I hate the ideology of capitalism. You cannot just tell me that you can assign an arbitrary value to something and then charge whatever you want for, say, said product, or not have any regulation on the wealth that you're, like, demanding from someone, or that you're accumulating, and that it's all just going to work out hunky-dory in the end. You can't just, we know in economies, you can't just, in terms of, especially in a capitalist world, you can't just print more money and expect that to fix your problems. That can cause mass inflation. You can't do that, or it's going to topple out from underneath your feet. So you can't just assign a value to something, then, like, have everyone fight over that value for whatever, like, how much of prices. Yeah, my number. Why exactly? Why? Just, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just out of curiosity. I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just asking out of curiosity. No, actually, I don't work here, but I mean, I'm in the area at points. Sorry, what? Well, I'm not necessarily. I'm not necessarily rejecting you. I just don't know you. I'm sorry. Okay, that was and my phone died. Well, at least something, well, better came out of today. I mean, nothing majorly terrible happened. It's just that got a wagon. Actually bought a wagon, and also got another tripod that actually has a ring light for better facial lighting, I'm assuming. I didn't really want one with the ring light because I don't need it at this moment, but it's actually the exact same one I had, like the exact same type of tripod. It's just, well, it has a ring light. So yeah, at least got this. Anyway, so I'm just gonna try and cap off what I was saying here. So you can't assign, my logical sense, you can't just assign arbitrary value to something, then allow others, and if you have to use currency to determine, like, who gets that, like, the value of it, okay, by the currency that a system has, or like the negotiated trade, or determined trade system that a group of people has. You can't just tell me you can amass as much profit as you want from it, from either that exact thing or just in general, and expect everyone to be able, A, to afford it, if you're gaining a monopoly on fucking the system itself, or like just accumulating more wealth to a point where there isn't enough actual negotiable trade to go around. So you can't just, maybe I'm not making sense right now, but that's what I'm capping off. I find it so unbelievably unbearable when people tell me that, like I hate how people think that everyone can be financially well off or be able to gain enough wealth to support themselves in a system like this that allows for unchecked wealth accumulation without some, I think that there would be like no major negative consequences to it, when there absolutely is. It's just, so, you know what, I'll think about this a bit more, but that's my question to anyone out there. Should capitalism be considered, like, just outright a form of subtle, like, should we stop actually, like, just calling it capitalism? Should we just outright call it what it maybe seems to be, just outright subtly disguised fascism, in a sense? And it's kind of like the same, I feel like I'm gonna start actively, I kind of already have. I've already said that I don't believe countries like China, like, economically, and, well, technically governmentally as well, but communism isn't a governmental political system. Marxism is, and also things such as Maoism, Stalinism, and Leninism, but not near those, they implement communism in them, or socialism, in a sense. I've talked about how I don't believe that China, places like China, Vietnam, Tibet, Laos, and North Korea are not actually communist countries, nor are most of them, neither are they socialist. They are capitalism in literal denial. I made a joke about, for China, in, well, my The World in 18 Minutes video, which if you scroll down is a ways in my skits. It was after the first Too Much Talking Twink that I did. I made a joke on, when I was directing it at China, or the Chinese, well, well, I guess not the government, but economic system, it still maintains like it's the Communist Party of China. It's not. It's not a communist state. It's not. It's capitalism in literal denial. Like, how many fucking billionaires does China have by this point? Like, seriously. Okay, it has a hell of a lot, but not near their population. Not near even close to it. You know what I mean. You know what I'm trying to say. Should we just literally start outright calling... I'll let people decide. I'll think about this a bit more. It's similar to what I said in my last Exploring Ottawa video with the whole child labor laws and how they're implemented. Should we just start calling it for what it is, or what it seems to be, just subtly disguised fascism? I don't know right now. Yeah, there was more that I wanted to discuss in this video. I know I wanted to correct myself on something. What was it? I was gonna say it, or maybe not correct myself. Yes, actually there. I'll address this, just before I sign out here. Actually, hold on. Alright, just readjusted something. I'll actually state this, in regards to, some of you are probably wondering how the whole, wondering if I went back to the Newton Strip Club to meet with the managerial staff about a job position. Yes, I did, but, unfortunately, I got tied up with something, before going to actually inquire about a job with them. So I went at the time, on the weekend, when they said that they would, that the people I should speak to in terms of a hiring position, for hiring purposes, they said to come back because they'd be there on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I went there last Sunday and I missed them. I just missed them by 2.5 hours. It's okay, maybe not just missed them, but I missed them. So they said you can try again next weekend. So that's what I'm going to try and do tomorrow. Get all dolled up as I can. Not excessively, obviously, but anyway. And again, I further scoped out the place when I went in. So, yeah. Should I talk about quickly how much charge do I have? Yeah, why not? I also mentioned in the last Exploring Ottawa video where I showed the Newton Strip Club from its exterior. I mentioned I'm going to tell them what my limitations would be. Now, I guess I'll just label that quickly here. My limitations would be, now obviously with everything in life there has to be some compromises, I'm aware, but there are things with my logical, moral standing that I will not do in which pertains to sex work, as I've already discussed a lot of my feelings towards certain things. even though I'm, again, I am pro sex work, and not just in a legal fashion, but just socially. I do think there is good benefit in it for both the performers, or both the users of sex work and the distributors of sex work. So, anyway, I'll get into that later. I've already gone over that I don't know how many times. But anyway, my limitations. Number one, I will not, if I get hired on as a performer, I will not perform VIP lap dances on anyone who is below 18. Absolutely not. Now, my stance on whether or not someone that age should be fine just being let into a club for non-sexual purposes. Legally, again, I don't think the police should encroach. You know my libertarian stance on things. I believe in a minimalistic policing regimen. So, for non-sexual purposes, then I think it's fine to just let them into the establishment. Like for food and drink and that sort of thing, or if there was a separate area for the stuff. But in regards to actual, like, sexual performance, when it comes to the actual, like, the walkway type thing, or on-stage performances for a crowd in the club, that one obviously I can't control, and I don't have a problem with that when it's not directly in physical contact. Same thing goes with pornography. If you're I've talked about my stance on how I do think 18 in legal regards is, for the most part, a fine enough age for, like, to go into sex work at, for the most part. But I've said I don't think that, I think maybe in terms of an age of consent for anyone beyond 2 years of your age, at the very least, even just moralistically, I think it'd be better to wait until you are 22. And though, again, I've said I do believe in a close in age range consent, some form of close in age range consent being allowed for anyone between the ages of 13 to 22 in terms of close in age range, like no more than 2 years of your age, starting at 15, no less than 2 years of your age. Now, that gets into how would that be policed? Well, in some small fashion, yes, I'll get into that in a different point, but I'm just saying at least some form of legal protection in the smallest regard in that stance. But, okay, anyway, so I've already discussed that, and in accordance with that moral stance, I am 18, I will not okay, what I was going to say is I don't have a problem if, like, you're just watching, say, pornography or strip performance, and you're over, like, beyond 2 years of age of anyone who's between the ages of 18 and 22. Obviously, that's just physically watching, and psychologically, that's not majorly detrimental. That's not, as I've discussed before, psychological pedophilia, or, well, if it was at that age, it would be herbophilia. I think I'm actually going to talk about, I think there should be a distinction between those names, given the information I now know, would be, like, a distinction between, and this doesn't mean, like, it's good, none of them are good in terms of physically acting out the behavior, or endorsing said behavior in many regards, but there should be an actual specific label for, like, pedophilia in terms of a disorder, and same with pedophilia and herbophilia. There should be a label for it as a mental disorder, and then the label for a sexuality, which is sadly one of the three of the few that I think you would actually need to repress, because, well, yes, policing in some way, but even just ethically yourself repress because of the detriment it would cause in almost every regard possible being acted out. You know what I mean? I've already said this before in my, well, I've said this in my the commodification of children video. So what I'm saying, anyway, getting back, I don't think though just physically being aroused by it in terms of like technically by psychological standards, like psychological standpoint, it's not technically problematic psychologically for that to be physically aroused by that, or having that thought process and becoming aroused technically. So I don't have a problem, say, with someone beyond 22 years of age if they're watching porn, jerking off to a 19 or a 20-year-old. If like a 25-year-old is jerking off to a performer who is 21, I don't have a problem with that because it's not in the physical immediate. They're not actually engaging in. Now, obviously, it's obviously still a sensual and sexual experience, and that shouldn't diminish that. But I'm just saying, I don't have a moral problem with it because in terms of the safety of the performer, because it's not in the physical immediate. If they were actually engaging in sexual contact with them, that'd be a whole nother story. So, in relation to that, with my logical morals, I will not perform any physical, like, lap dances on... God, I gotta... doing, like, looking around and also trying to control this friggin' cart. It should be fine enough, but just... anyway, I will not perform lap dances on anyone below 18, obviously, and I will not perform lap dances, private lap dances, on anyone who is above, who is above, let me see, 19, who is above 20. I will not perform any lap dances on anyone who is above 20. So basically, my performance range in terms of age, like when it's one-on-one or group on one, or whatever it may be, in a private room, would be 18 turning 19 or 19 turning 20. And that's it for me. I'm not going beyond that. And I will make that very clear right off the bat. My other limitation would be, well, I am not going to obviously condone any... Let me run across. God, this must look quite interesting from the car's perspective. I will not obviously engage, I will not tolerate any form of, well, anything that isn't I don't consent to. If I am not, I will not tolerate any customers assuming what is acceptable in terms of my what kinks or fetishes that I may be into. I will not tolerate that. Now, obviously, there's a compromise of what I may be willing to explore, but I will not, anything that they request or that I request, obviously, because it's not just all on them, my part to be consentful as well, and consenting, with me not actually trying to pull anything on them that they do not verbally or communicatively tell me. There will be I will not tolerate like any assumption of what someone may be comfortable with. I will not. So that is not just in physical regards, not just physically. If you're trying to do like dirty talk or like very sexually arousing, trying to sexually arouse someone or me, like with flirtatious words without actually asking if I am comfortable with that, I will not tolerate that. We'll make that very clear right off the bat. What else will I make very clear right off the bat? Oh yes, I will also make very, very clear that, if the, well, if I am harassed in any way, I will defend myself physically. I will not, because I logically, morally believe in self-defense, though I don't like using it, or I don't like using violence, unless it's absolutely needed, which again, I consider self-defense to be the time that it is needed. I don't like getting angry unless it's absolutely needed, but that would be a time that it is needed. And this is why I don't believe in letting go of anger without actual, like, the person trying to, like, reconcile with me. Anyway, I will make it clear that I don't care. I'll make it clear that I'm not in it entirely, obviously, for the money. I don't believe, even, like, logically, as I've said before, that you should have the right to do it for the money if you want. I don't believe you should have the right to gain further wealth than another person, or amalgamate, amass ton, and create a monopoly. I don't think you should have the right to do that. But if you want to still be greedy and just do it for the money, whether you're paid the same as someone else or not, I think you should have the legal right to do that, yeah. Socially, though, I think that's very unhealthy. I think money is, as I've said before, the whole financial unfulfillmentism. I think money is worthless but not useless. Anyway, back to my point, I will make it clear that I am not just there for profits. Yes, obviously I need cash. I need to make some sort of income. But also, I do believe that you should have, even if it's just a job you're doing for, like, income, and it's not your true calling or your true passion of what you want to do, which I firmly believe that you should not, as I've said really before, I guess, you should not go to sex work, in my opinion, at all, with how physically intimate it is. You should not go to it. Okay, you should not go to it. And this isn't me giving advice to one single person. This is where I said, like, I don't think giving, like, just advice, say, to a group of people, or, say, the internet, you have to say if you want my advice, because, well, you're giving it to a vast, wide audience who have varying opinions, and you can't, obviously, in this format, you can't check with them. And obviously, if you do it to a group of people, not one-on-one, then you're going to get a wide variety of responses who deems it to be, yes, I would like that advice, or no, I would not. So, and then there'd be interpersonal argument. But anyway, I will make it, I don't think you should go towards sex work just for the money, with how intimate it really is. I think that can cause a wide variety of problems. Oh, 3%, great. Anyway, so I'll make it clear that I will defend myself regardless of how it makes the customer feel. And I will immediately call the bouncer to please, as gently as possible, escort them out, even if they were trying to harass me, as I don't, unless they were physically trying to do it while the bouncer was escorting them away from me, I would please request them, don't do it violently, if you can. Please don't. Don't, like, throw them out the door. Just plop them out on the sidewalk and say good day. And maybe I will actually write down a number of a psychiatrist or psychological health clinic for them to go to, because they need serious help if they are doing so, trying to physically assault me. But anyway, but what I will also, and the last thing I'll say here that I will make absolutely clear to, yeah, I'm still in charge, clear to the establishment and the owners, is that no contracts. I will not sign a contract. I morally, really, unless I'm really have no choice to, or if it's some form of a waiver in a sense, which really isn't a contract in and of itself necessarily, but I will not sign a contract. I don't really, logically, I don't morally agree with contractual obligations in terms of legal stances for most things, pretty well everything. Maybe there's a bit of a loophole that could cause a problem there without them, but I'll have to think about that a bit more. But as of right now, in this regard, I will not sign any contracts with the club. Absolutely not. I will, and if they say, well, that's the only way that you can get to work here, well, then sucks for me, I'm not working there. As I will tell them, the only way you get me is if I sign no contracts. And if you give me a slip of paper or a form to just sign, I am going to read it over extensively in front of you, and if I have a question, I will make you explain it. Well, I won't make you, but I will ask you to please explain it, and I will try and psychoanalyze you to see if you are manipulating me. I don't know if I'll actually say that to them, but, or I will get a second opinion on the form. So yeah, no contracts. So those are my main ground rules right now. There's obviously probably some more I just didn't touch on here, but that's the gist of it. So I hope this video was of some worth to you. Yeah, go check out Sunn M'Cheaux's channel. The link will be in the description. Yeah, I'm going to get back to where I'm staying, because I really, really, really got to take a massive, humongous, ginormous pee. Actually, as well, just quickly before before my phone dies, just remembered, I'm self-deprecating. That's another part of my personality. I'm also, at points I can be very, very self-deprecating, and if it wasn't apparent by the very reason that I'm even here in Ottawa, I'm very much full of doubt. A lot of fucking self-doubt. And worldly doubt. Just doubt, and I'm full of doubt. A lot of doubt. There's a lot of fucking doubt.